power of attorney and guardianship. Stay tuned and I'm going to tell you everything you need to know about who they're for, what the difference between the two is, why you might need to use them. It's important to understand the difference between power of attorney and guardianship. And the main difference is that power of attorney can only be set up by somebody who has the capacity to understand what power of attorney is when it's arranged. So if you're caring for somebody who doesn't have capacity right now, they can't have a power of attorney. You're now going to be looking at guardianship. So the nuts and bolts of it are that power of attorney can only be arranged when somebody has the understanding of what a power of attorney is and the powers that they would potentially be giving away. In Scotland, power of attorneys can be set up from the age of 16 onwards because that's when we become adults in Scotland. And in the rest of the UK, it's 18 and over. The power of attorney document would list the people that you want to be your attorneys and the powers that you would want them to have. So again, that would be welfare powers or financial powers or indeed both. And there is a bit of a misconception that power of attorneys are only set up by older people. And that's not true at all. My husband and I both have power of attorneys set up because you never know what's going to happen with illness, accidents, whatever. And once you've lost that capacity, let's say you're become ill, you have a stroke or something and you can't make decisions for yourself, it's too late to do the power of attorney at that point. So we've got them both set up for hopefully a long time into the future. So you can set up a power of attorney for anybody at any age once they're an adult. To organise a power of attorney, just find yourself a solicitor and they will give you lots more information about how they work and how to set them up. So guardianship is a little bit more complicated, but you should be thinking about it if you care for somebody who is or is approaching the age of 16 and who does not have capacity to make their own decision. In England and Wales, it's called deputyship, and it's from 18 and over, just because that's when you become an adult there. It can be time consuming to organise guardianship, and I think that puts a lot of people off doing it. They think it's going to be a lot of hassle and it's going to take ages to organise. They don't really understand it, but it's so important that you explore the idea of guardianship if you're caring for somebody who can't make decisions, because once they become an adult, you as their parent or their carer legally would lose the right to do things like access their health records, make decisions about their medical care, make decisions about where they live and who looks after them. So although it can be a bit daunting, a bit overwhelming, a bit scary maybe to think about organising guardianship, it's really, really important that you do it. And it can take, like I said, it can take a long time to organise guardianship. And so the advice generally is that you start doing all of the organisation and finding a solicitor when your child turns 15. So that's a full year before they become an adult, but it can take a really long time to organise. So even if you're just starting to make a couple of phone calls when they start to turn 15, it's really important that you do that. So that first step will be finding a solicitor, preferably one who has got some experience of doing guardianship. And they will then need to assess whether they think guardianship is appropriate, because one of the testers is that it needs to be for the benefit of the person who the guardianship is being arranged for. So they will want to make sure that the person who you're trying to get guardianship for actually needs it and would benefit from it. So costs. In a lot of cases, you should, or the person who the guardianship is for, should be entitled to claim under legal aid. So ring round more than one solicitor and make sure that you're getting the best deal, preferably solicitors who will offer legal aid support. So who would be the guardian for somebody? Well, usually it would be either a family member or a friend, and it can be more than one person. So it could be two parents, for example. However, if nobody is willing to be that person's guardian, then the obligation falls to the local authority. Right, so once the solicitor has established that guardianship is appropriate, they need to obtain 3 or possibly 4 reports from different professionals. They need to get a report from a local mental health officer who is a specially trained social worker usually, who comes and does a report about your family circumstances and the individual. They need a medical report from somebody like a GP or a paediatrician, a doctor who knows the individual. And then you would also be getting a report from a psychiatrist, a consultant psychiatrist, who would make the judgment as to whether or not the person has capacity to make decisions. And then sometimes you might need a report about financial affairs, and that would be a lawyer that would do that. One of the challenges is that those 3 or 4 reports all need to be completed within a very short period of time. So If there is a delay with any of those professionals, it can cause issues. And that is one of the biggest problems at the moment, particularly where we are in Scotland. There is a shortage of mental health officers, and we waited nearly 6 months for a mental health officer to be available to come and do the report for our son. And so the whole guardianship process is delayed. And that's one of the reasons why, as I said earlier, you want to apply in advance if you can. Sometimes people might lose capacity suddenly, and then you can't plan ahead for that, obviously. But if you're caring for a child who's approaching adulthood who you know will not have capacity to make decisions, that's why you need to plan early, because it can take ages for those reports to be completed. Once those reports are done, the solicitor would write their report, send it all to the sheriff or the judge, and then they would make a decision in court as to whether or not the guardianship order was appropriate. Now, you should also know that guardianship, once it's given, is not forever, or very, very rarely is it forever. The most it's going to be is maybe 3 years, sometimes even less, or 5 years, usually at the maximum, which is really frustrating if you're caring for somebody who you know is never going to regain or has never had capacity. But unfortunately, that's the way the law stands, and it's there to protect the interests of people who have incapacity, just in case they regain skills. So it's to protect those people. But it's the way the law is, and so it's highly unlikely that the guardianship order would be for very long. And then you need to do it again. Now, thankfully, when you reapply for guardianship, it's a much simpler and quicker process. So you will get a reminder through the post to say that the guardianship order is coming up for renewal. Really important that you start the process of renewal when that comes, when that arrives. So don't ignore it when it falls through the letterbox, because as soon as that application is in before the expiry date, your powers will continue until the guardianship is renewed. If you don't reapply before the expiry date, you'll need to start the whole process again and get those 3 or 4 reports. And so you really want to try and get that renewal in before it expires. Once you have guardianship, there are some ongoing responsibilities, mainly around accounting. So keeping account of the money that is spent for the person who is you have guardianship for. And I believe at the moment you need to keep receipts for things that you've spent over £100. So it's not like petty cash. It's not for your £2 here and your £5 there. It's for large expenses. So there's a lot to know about guardianship and power of attorney, way more than I can tell you in this short video. But my main message is, if you think it's irrelevant, especially for guardianship, if you think it's relevant, don't shy away from it. Have a look through this information that I've given you. Make sure you understand the basics and go and find yourself a solicitor. Don't worry about it, just get it done. I need to say thank you to Donald Winskill, who is a solicitor for Gillespie Macadrew, and he's kept me right with all my facts to make sure that I don't give you any wrong information, so thanks to him. I hope that's helped. There's lots of other videos on my channel to inform and support you if you're a carer, information about all sorts of things from therapies to what self-directed support is. So have a look at some of my other videos and I'm sure you're going to find something that's useful to you.